If you remember YouTube a couple of months ago, I posted a video based on my utter outrage at the Spider-Man reboot. And again, I still think it is a shit idea, because I don't think the series ever needs rebooting ever, but all the same. So the video was posted on YouTube, and I had a request from one, now tell me if I'm pronouncing this right, Wetboy40. He asked me to do a review of each of the Spider-Man films. And I thought a little bit of time about this to think, would I have time to do them? So of course, Wetboy40, here's the reviews especially for you. So here we go. So there's individual reviews of each of the Spider-Man films. So here we go. Now here is the first review on the first Spider-Man film. Now this was released in 2002, and of course, as we all know, it's directed by Sam Raimi and stars Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, and Willem Dafoe. Sorry. The throat might be a bit groggy in review, but let's try and get this done. Anyway, the plot of Spider-Man. Peter Parker is having a really lame time at school. He's on the uncool side of the light. He doesn't get any respect from his kids, from his fellow peers, at high school. You know, so he's not having the two best of lives. But one day, the school decides to go on a little field trip to a museum. And you think it would be an ordinary day, right? Nope. What happens is that Peter ends up getting bitten by a spider, which ultimately genetically mutates his DNA and gives him some spider-webbed abilities. And then after about a third of the film, he decides to try and use these for good, whilst defending New York City from the evil Green Goblin. And whilst he's also trying to prove himself to Mary Jane Watson, who throughout a series of, she was basically going out with someone else at the time, but anyway, so it's sort of a love story, but mixed with action and a good story. Now, now let's just skip straight into the pros and cons. One of the things I loved about Spider-Man was that the acting, I hadn't really seen. I saw this when I was very young. I saw it when I was it was in 2002, so I saw it when I was about 11 or 12, and I really couldn't remember much at the time, but after watching bits of the movie again, I realised that I actually love this film. I absolutely adore Spider-Man. Now the acting is really top-notch in this film. Tobey Maguire, I thought, was excellent at portraying the uncool side of Peter Parker, and then of course the more badass side of him and the cheeky side of him, I will say. This was a nice little bit of humour mixed in there. But Kristen Stewart, can't believe I said that. Kirsten Dunst was excellent at portraying Mary Jane Watson. I thought that she had a real innocence to her character, and it really made her character in some ways more likeable, because because the relationships were really well developed for Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson. James Franco is more of a side character in this one, but he plays a bigger part in Spider-Man 3. But for the first two films, he's kind of a side character. But with him, even though he didn't have much to work with, I think he did a decent enough job. He was probably the weakest out of the four of them, but all the same, I would say that he did what he was required to do. Willem Dafoe was awesome as the Green Goblin, and I've seen him in such other films like as Daybreakers, for example. He was awesome in that movie, which I'm going to do a review of at some point in the future. And I think that he was pretty awesome here as the Green Goblin. The sides to his character, I thought, were blended in and mixed in really, really well. You could not have picked a better guy to portray Norman Osborn. Now let's get into the other pros about the film. The cinematography and the flying shots and sequences in this film, they really are stunning. It makes you feel like you're there. They feel like you're soaring with Spider-Man throughout the whole of the New York City, and that you are ultimately taken in for a spin and a ride and adventure. But so the cinematography and technical side everything was brilliantly done. The action sequences were awesome as well, even though this has the weakest for action out of the three of them, because I found the action sequences to be a little bit slow, but all the same. Another thing I like, the character development. Now, the Spider-Man series, all three films, yes, including the third one, in all three films, they have a knack for developing characters well, but still don't lose track of the story, and the way that all three series blends these in are nicely done, I will say. At least in the first two films they are anyway. They're really, the balance of them is brilliantly done, But moving on from that, I loved how the action, the drama, the romance, and the comedy, and all on the storyline, they're all blended nicely together. Each came in at the right time. It came in at its own appropriate way, and it wasn't there just for the sake of it, which is why I enjoyed. Other things I liked about the film: the running length was fine with me. It wasn't dragging. It wasn't too fast. It kept it at a nice steady pace, maybe with the exception of the beginning, and then. But like I say, once it gets going, it's really brilliant. Oh, I forgot to mention two other people: Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben, and Rosemary Harris as, I think that's her name, Rosemary Harris as Aunt May. Both of them easily brilliant. You know. Now, unfortunately, we have to get into. Oh, I forgot to mention one last thing: the direction of the movie is awesome as well. It really does. Sam Raimi, I could see at the time he was quite nervous about directing this sort of a movie of this scale. But this movie deserved every penny it made. It was a truly fantastic film. Not a masterpiece, but a really fantastic film. So, on me. Now let's get into the cons of Spider-Man. Now, the couple of nitpicks that I had about this film. It did tend to be a bit slow in the beginning. I was wanting it to speed up a bit quicker and build up more towards the action. I didn't think it did enough of that in the beginning. It didn't bother me too much about the film, but it still did sort of bother me. Another thing I didn't like about the film was that some of the action sequences in this film are incredibly slow. You could literally, but then again, at the time, this was still a phenomenon. It's just when you see Spider-Man 2 and 3, you really do get the difference between the fighting sequences and what the speed levels they are, particularly in the second film. But that's beside the point, look. The ending, I also thought, another thing about this movie I loved, the ending was powerful, it was really dramatic. And again, because what Sam Raimi did well with these Spider-Man films is that he managed to create all the elements needed, and you still are invested in the characters. And that's what I really think that he did extraordinarily well, and I don't blame him for signing on to do this film and the two sequels as well, because they're really magnificent movies. Anyway, but look, to sum things up, Spider-Man is a great introduction to the trilogy, and I think that it easily deserves 4.5 stars out of 5. I loved it. It was a fantastic film. I thought that it really has the character development well, and I am proud to have it in my DVD collection. So that's my review of Spider-Man, and until next time, YouTube, I shall be back, probably quite soon actually, but by the time this video gets up, it's a while. Anyway, be sure to watch for a review of Spider-Man 2.